Hi there, my name's Robin Murphy, and I'm an art teacher in the district. What I do with kids to present an artist is I dress up as that artist, and I try to give a first-hand view of what that person was like and what their life was like. I then have a bunch of activities that they can do after I'm done talking for about 15-20 minutes, and they get to really experience the artist and get to know him personally. This year's artist is a Russian artist named Marc Chagall, and his artwork is of the surrealist style. So a lot of his pictures seem very strange. They have a lot of people upside down, and there's a lot of symbolism. But I'll explain a little bit more about that. What I usually do is I turn around, but since I already have microphones and things on, I won't do that. But I'll start talking as if I'm Marc Chagall. Hello there, boys and girls. My name is Marc Chagall. I was a Russian surrealist that lived in the early 1900s, and my artwork was very, very different than some of the people that came before me. I was the artist of lovers, a lot of people called me. So you'll see an essence of love in my pictures. I was born July 7th, 1887, and I was Jewish. I was a Hasidic Jew, and for the number 7 is really a magical, mystical number in my Jewish faith. So July 7th, the 7th month and the 7th day of 1887 was a big deal. My birth was pretty traumatic. My village of Vitebsk, Russia, had a fire the day I was born, and actually my neighbor's house was on fire. So my mom was in the middle of labor, and this time a lot of people gave birth at home. So the neighbors and my father carried my mother out into the street while she was giving birth, and I was actually born in the street. I was stillborn, which means I wasn't breathing, and so one of the neighbors actually took me and put me into an ice bucket of water, and I started coughing and breathing. So it was pretty amazing that I survived a fire and that I came back to life. So I had a really interesting upbringing from the very beginning. I was the oldest of 9 children. You can see in this family picture, here I am. My mother worked at a store, and my father was a herring fisherman. So he worked really hard carrying sacks of herring and did lots of different things. The town I lived in, we were real poor. This is a painting I made of the house that we lived in. You can see that. I used blue for the colors. This was called an izba, which is kind of a shack in Russian, and you can see the fancy town of Vitebsk in the distance. From an early age, I decided I wanted to be an artist. I remember a friend saying, "Oh, you draw good, you should be an artist." And so I told my parents I wanted to be an artist. For one, Jewish people didn't go on to school, and it was kind of unheard of. I wasn't going to be accepted into some of the schools. So my mom actually had to pull a lot of strings to get me to be able to work with a Russian artist. And she took me to this artist and said, "Do you think he's got any talent?" Luckily, the artist said that he thought I had some talent. Really early on, when I was about 18, I fell in love with a beautiful girl in my village. Her name was Bella. And when I was in my early 20s, this is Bella, I asked her parents if I could marry her. And they said, "To an artist? No, definitely not." And so I went off to Paris, France to study some more, but I kept thinking about Bella and what she was, how much I loved her. This is a picture of me in my early 20s as well. In Paris, I stayed at it was called the Beehive. It was a studio for artists, and you can see here is a picture of the little loft I lived in. A lot of famous artists were also living there. It was called Le Ruche, and Matisse and I had some great input from other artists. I did a lot of fresh paintings. There's one picture of a self-portrait of me that I did, and you might notice, if you look at my hand, that I put 7 fingers on my hand. As I told you, 7 is a very mystical number for the Jewish religion, And they always say if you have 7 fingers, you could get a lot more work done. Well, after about 4 years in Paris, I went back and I asked Bella to marry me. And we soon got married. But then war broke out in Russia. You might have heard of the Russian Revolution. And the Russian Revolution was when the people overthrew the Tsar Nicholas II, who was the Tsar and had been, the Tsars had been ruling Russia for a very long time. So I wasn't able to leave and take Bella back to Paris. So we were kind of stuck there. And I got an office job in the Army because I was drafted. And we soon had our daughter, Ida, okay, who was the joy of our life. This was a very magical time. I was so happy. A lot of my pictures from this time, you'll see all 3 of us. You can see in this portrait, Bella has me on her shoulders, and then Ida is a little angel in the top in purple. Okay, this is a picture from Bella had decorated the apartment for my birthday, and I had brought her flowers, and I'm floating because we were so much in love that I was floating through the picture. Bella and I in this picture are floating over Vitebsk, Russia, our love carrying us higher. You might notice this one is called the Newlyweds, and you can see the Eiffel Tower as well as some of the symbolism that I used in my pictures, violins and roosters. Well, after 4 years, we moved from Russia to Paris, and we went back, and I was able to catch up with some of my artist friends and do a lot more art. A lot of my paintings had symbolism in them, and you may look at them and you may think that why is something floating, but symbolism is the use of an object to represent something else. So in this picture, Time Knows No Bounds, you can see that I have a fish with fire wings playing a violin, and then there's a clock showing the passage of time. There's some people in love on the ground here. Each of these symbols were important to me. My uncle used to play the violin, so you might notice it also shows up in this picture where I have the violin and animals. When I think back of my childhood in Vitebsk, there's always animals that show up in my memories. Because I was a surrealist, I did a lot of pictures that came from my dreams. Surrealism was a style of art that was happening at the time where people didn't want to paint the real world. What they wanted to do was to create a new world with their imaginations. And they looked at their dreams for inspiration. So if there's something upside down, like this first painting that I showed you with my name here, this is called I in the Village. I have houses that are upside down, people that are upside down. There's a horse, and I'm looking at the horse, but then there's a superimposed, milkmaid on top of there. A lot of times images in your dreams kind of come and go, and they don't always seem like they're exactly real. Some of my pictures have strange colors. You might say, well, why did you make your face green? Green to me was a symbol of hope. It was, if we think about, here in Alaska, we have all the snow melting, and green is just starting to spring forth. Everything's turning green. It's a sign of gratitude. It's a color of fantasy and freedom. So a lot of people in my pictures have green faces. This is one of my uncle playing the violin. I was lucky to have fame and fortune really early. From Paris, I had a sponsor in Germany, and I had my first art show in Germany. Was able to become famous pretty fast. Then World War II broke out, and being Jewish, I was really afraid for my family, and I was invited to come to the United States, and I felt really fortunate. We had an art show in New York and Chicago. A lot of my paintings showed different things. I really was fascinated with the circus. I thought the circus was a beautiful and kind of fantasy, it fit right in with surrealism. You can see this one. I have some of the soldiers from the early World War I drinking tea, and I'm going to be sharing some tea with you, with the students. So I did a lot of really interesting art. While we were in America, Bella, after 36 years of being married, Bella fell ill from an infection, and her death was really traumatic for me. I painted 2 pictures, and it was actually a picture that was cut in half. And you can see that some of the symbols of my sadness. You can see this one, there's 7 candles on the menorah. And then I have a fiddler player, there's a goat. And this painting, I did several pictures during this time to kind of deal with my grief. After about 4 years, Bella was a big part of my artwork. I met another lady, and her name was Valentina, and she and I became married. I was quite older. And you can see in this picture, this was my new wife. Her name was Valentina, and I called her Valva. You can see this is a painting I did of her, once again also with a green face. Okay. Well, after being so famous now, I was invited to lots of different places. In Paris, they invited me to do the ceiling of the opera house there. And this was one of my prize works. It took me 3 years to paint the ceiling of this opera house in Paris. I traveled to Jerusalem and did some stained glass windows in Jerusalem. I was able to do some more stained glass windows in the United States. My stained glass windows were done very differently than anyone else had done it in the past. I used acid to change areas that were lighter or darker and to make some variances of color. I felt really fortunate. Valva and I had moved to the south of France, and we had a real rich life there. I started doing some mosaics, which little pieces of glass put together. My daughter, Ida, had grown up, and you can see here she is with a picture of my first wife, Bella. So I had a really wonderful life. A lot of my pictures I had to redo because the originals got damaged. Before I was famous, people didn't think that they should keep the painting. So you can see in this picture, I did the same painting more than once. And you can see that there's some differences. This one I didn't put the writing. Okay, the color scheme has changed a little bit. Some of the symbols of Jewish faith, like the Star of David, the writing has changed a little bit. I was asked to do costumes and backdrops for ballets. I did all the backdrops for a ballet that was in Paris. You can still see some of the symbols that I used, the rooster, and this one's called the Firebird, and you can see how the bird is flying with the ballerina. I even designed the costumes for this ballet. In modern times, my artwork has been associated with lovers. This painting, it's called The Bride. It was in the movie Notting Hill, Julia Roberts and Hugh Grant. Julia Roberts gives this painting to Hugh Grant, and you can see that there's a lot of the same symbols that I've used, the goat, the violinist. My artwork is associated with love because of the floating people and how the colors are very soft and make people feel that like they're floating. I had a really rich, full life, and I had a heart attack on March 28, 1985. I was 97 years old, and I feel that my artwork always showed my early beginnings of Russia and what it was like growing up during the time that I did. Thank you very much.